Hello, everybody. Welcome. Guess what? This is the second to last event of our finance festival. We've got a chat function. Let's use that chat function. I want to know, where are people calling in from? Drop your LinkedIn, right? This is the time to network. If you are looking for something, right? You want to be hired. Maybe you're hiring, right? You have a business. This is all about starting businesses today. So tell people what you need, what you want, connect. Also, I am so curious. Has anybody come to our previous events on this festival? I can't even remember this. Yes, we did Bitcoin and crypto. We did NFTs. We did real estate. We did financial literacy. We did the stock market. We basically said to you all, if you are committed to getting rich, which I know you are, we need to be thinking creatively. There are so many ways that you can think about growing your wealth, and it's not just about making more at your job. That is the first step. That is the baseline for all of this. Now we really want to be thinking about the future, about generational wealth. Today's interesting. Today is about it's about getting yourself in the driver's seat of your career. And then how do you make money from your career on your own terms? And that's called, right, founding your own business. It also means taking risks and maybe not making much money in the beginning. So I'm watching this, basically, is what I'm saying. I'm going to be watching. And let me first tell you about who I am, thank our partners. I'll then introduce our panelists, because you are here not to hear me, but to hear them. So first, I'm Claire Wasserman. I am the founder of Ladies Get Paid. If you are not familiar with us, we are an educational platform and a global community of over 100,000 women, all learning how to level up professionally, financially. If you've been here before, you know that I'm obsessed with power and the idea of power and all of the ways that we can experience power. We have to get it. Way too many gaps: funding gap, investment gap, wage gap, leadership gap. We know it's depressing, and that's why we're here, because we're sick of it. And again, we're not waiting for anyone else to give us the rewards. We have to give it to ourselves. Public.com made this possible. That's why this is free. So we are going to thank them profusely. Public.com, they are an app. They're going to help you find companies that you believe in and invest in them. There's also a social component. So you can meet people, talk about what you're investing in. You can learn from them. If you have not yet downloaded Public, you're in for a treat. And by a treat, I mean $25. They're going to give you by signing up. So Ashley is going to just drop it in the chat. I believe she is pinning it to the top, so you won't miss out. Our other partner is Lolli, Lolli.com. They are the perfect way for you. If you want to get started with Bitcoin and you're a little bit nervous about investing your own money, they are the perfect partner for you, because what happens is you shop at Nike, Sephora, Macy. There's 1,000 brands that Lolli is partnered with. You'll get Bitcoin back, right? Think about cash back. You're actually going to get Bitcoin back from Lolli. So sign up with them, Lolli.com. And finally, the balance. Any questions about financial literacy, you don't have to Google it. You can just go straight to the balance. And they really break things down. They make it accessible, and we love them. And not just because they have helped make this festival possible. And so finally, you are here, again, not to hear me, but to hear Sarah and Kinsey. So let me give a quick overview of who they are. But of course, they can, they'll take it away in 1 minute here. So Sarah Kunst is the managing director of Cleo Capital, which is an early stage venture capital fund that invests in pre-seed and seed stage. So she's going to talk about what that means. Tech and tech-enabled investments. She's also a contributing editor to Marie Claire and a former senior advisor to the Bumble VC fund. Kinsey Grant, she is our lovely moderator. She is the co-founder and content lead at Thinking is Cool, which it is cool, which is a forthcoming podcast and media company. She was also the host of Morning Brew's first original podcast, Business Casual. I realized I had not said this at previous festival panels. These events are for educational purposes only and not investment advice. So do not hold us responsible. Do not sue us. Thank you. And the last thing, very last thing, is our closing keynote is tomorrow, April 28th at 8 p.m. Eastern. And guess who it is? It's the Commerce Secretary, Gina Raimondo. She was the first female governor of Rhode Island. She's doing really big things. It's free. Again, you don't want to miss it. And if you are not available and you do have to miss it, that's fine, because every single panel over the last 2 weeks we have recorded, and we'll be sending it out to you and putting it up on the Ladies Get Paid YouTube channel. Enough of me. I'm over my own voice. So thank you all for coming. Sarah and Kinsey, take it away.
Thank you so much, Claire. I appreciate that introduction. And thank you for having me, for allowing me to participate in this as a moderator. I am so thrilled to be here, so thrilled to virtually meet you, Sarah, and hear from all of the incredible people in this crowd tonight. So, I'm honored. It's fun. It's fun to be here, especially when we talk about helping women, marginalized groups of women, see themselves in business and see themselves in investing, because these are worlds that are for everyone. They have not always been built for everyone by the people in power. And we are doing our damnedest tonight to ensure that that's not the way that the future works out. So with that, we're going to talk tonight about being a founder, how to see yourself as a founder, how to understand the unique challenges and opportunities of becoming a founder, especially as a woman. And I want this to be an honest conversation, because the truth of being a woman in business isn't always pretty, but it is always interesting. So we're going to try to get to the bottom of as much as possible tonight. And I have to say, not going to lie here, I am so thrilled to be here, obviously, because I love everybody at Public and Ladies Get Paid and Lolli, and incredible to meet you, like I said, Sarah, but also I just started my own company. So I have kind of a vested interest here to understand the ins and outs of becoming a founder. So I've got this vested interest and I have a lot of questions. And I think that we should get right into that with you, Sarah, an incredible guest, somebody who I think will be able to answer so many questions about what it is like to be a woman founder. So with that, are you ready?
Yes, let's go.
All right, sweet. So I think that the best way to approach this, the way that I want to approach this conversation tonight, is to take this as kind of a threefold conversation. So number one, we should talk about growing a business, what it is like to grow a sustainable business, to scale, to fundraise, etc. Number two, growing yourself. How do you specifically ensure that you are minding your own emotional and mental well-being while you're also growing that business? And then finally, how can we help the rest of the world do the same thing, right? How can women founders who have earned acclaim help other women to do the same thing, or to get on the right track to do the same thing? So let's start out with growing this business. Let's understand the ins and outs of becoming a founder. And like I said, growing something that's sustainable, something that has staying power in a world that is obviously very unpredictable at times. So Sarah, what has your journey to entrepreneurship been like? How did your career evolve to get you where you are today in your career, to make you capable of being a founder? What has that journey been like for you?
Yeah. So, I've been a founder and now I run a venture fund. And so I'm on a different side. And, for me, I started in marketing and was at Chanel in marketing in 2008, which 2008 was not a great time to do marketing, luxury marketing, because the entire world collapsed that time in a financial meltdown. And so not very many people were buying very expensive things. So, I made the jump to startups and never really looked back. And, at that time, it was a relatively easy decision, even compared to a few years before then, because there weren't really any other great jobs. And so, the opportunity cost, which is something you should be really honest with yourself about. And by that, I mean, like, go to your bank account. If you are in significant amounts of debt, or if you don't have a lot of money, then you have a much higher opportunity cost than your friend who has a trust fund, or whose parents were able to pay for college, or who worked in investment banking right out of college and has, $250,000 in their savings account separate from all their other, retirement savings, right? So that is important. But in 2008, I didn't have any of those things. I had a whole bunch of student loan debt, or 2009, I had a whole bunch of student loan debt, and a relatively, decent paying job for fashion, which means very low paying job. But, there weren't a lot of other options at the time. There was no, I'll go work at Google. Google barely had a New York office at this point, and they certainly weren't hiring in 2009. So there wasn't sort of a fallback plan. And the nice part about not having a fallback plan is that you get to do kind of what you're really excited about. And so, I was excited about startups. I'd seen corporate. I'd seen one of the most amazing iterations of corporate, where you work for, one of the coolest brands in the world that's a privately owned company. So you're not dealing with sort of, some of the craziness of public company corporate culture. I was relatively well paid, all of the things that I was like, this is good. And if it hadn't been for the recession, I might still work there. But instead I was like, when I left, I was like, well, where else am I going to go? I've already sort of been at the top. If you care about fashion and your first job out of school is Chanel, then, if you're even slightly unsure that you want to be in the field, you should go to a different field and test it out. And so, I was able to take that jump into startups. And I jumped into startups. I just started cold outreach and emailing startups and finally got a job at one, doing biz dev. And it wasn't a job I exactly knew how to do, but I figured I would figure it out. It was a little bit of a pay cut, but I was excited about it. And I just threw myself into it and I worked really, really, really hard. And I think that especially when you're starting out, that's something that you shouldn't overestimate because you're not that good at anything. Well, if you're that good at anything, you actually know it. And that doesn't mean like you went to a decent school. It means like, do you have third-party verification that you are number one or at least top 5 at something, right? So if you are, the number one, whatever it is, math Olympiad champion in the world, right? Then okay, you're good at something and you can probably work smart, not hard. If you are a smart person who went to a decent school and has a piece of paper that says you have a degree and you had a couple internships and you're 22, I promise you're not particularly good at anything. Yes. But what you can be is good at working really, really, really hard. And if you're good at working really, really hard, then you generally are going to get the opportunities that allow you to learn how to be good at things.
Yeah, I think you make so many very, very interesting and important points. But 2 of them, in my experience of having worked for a media startup, especially my last job at Morning Brew, things I just didn't recognize going in. I started the job when I was 23 years old. It was my second job. I'd only been in the working world for 1 year. And I did underestimate how hard I would have to work. And I didn't ask a lot of the questions that I probably now looking back absolutely would have asked about the future of the company and like thinking about my own financial situation. And luckily for me, it worked out and the company succeeded. But I think a lot of people don't necessarily give that the credence that it needs, right? To sit back and say, how good am I at this? Am I willing to work my tail off for 14 hours a day doing this? And number 2, can I afford to do this, right? It sounds so fun and sexy to work for a startup or even to start your own thing. But at the end of the day, there are a lot of challenges.
And paying your rent is so sexy. Paying off your student loan debt is so sexy. Like right. Being able to afford to have a life and optionality for a life is so sexy. And like, if the idea is so amazing and you have so much passion for it, it'll be there later. Right. And I think that especially women, if you have money, great, give me some. But like, if not, the reality is most people on this call probably don't have a trust fund. Go, earn some money because then you have so much more optionality for the rest of your life. And go invest some money, go save some money, go get money and whatever that means to you relatively, especially in your first jobs and especially if you're not, totally passionate about what you're doing right now, or you're sort of torn between 2 options and they're both kind of like, okay, but neither one is like the one, go for the one that makes more money. Like, my friend Sally Krawcheck likes to say, nothing bad happens when women have more money, right? And like lean into that and go like stockpile your money. And then the things you love, you'll find. And, there's tons of things we all do every day that we love to do that we don't have to get paid for. I don't have to get paid to call my friend or my parents. I just want to talk to them, right? And so if you're super passionate and you love doing something, you don't have to get paid immediately. You can do it as a hobby. You can do it in your spare time while you do something that actually like allows you to get in a financial situation where you can eventually pursue it full time.
Yeah, I think incredible advice, especially with people in this like Gen Z generation. It's always, if I'm good at something and I enjoy doing it, why am I not making money doing it? Well, if you're not making money doing it now, it doesn't mean you can't do that later, but stop, reassess your life, figure it out, and then go from there. So let's talk about, those are some of the challenges before you get into the startup world or get into becoming a founder. What about the challenges that present themselves as you are on that founder journey? So as somebody who has founded things and has invested in founders, especially now, what are some of the biggest challenges when we talk about fundraising and scaling specifically? I think these are 2 really interesting facets of this conversation. So we can kind of take them one at a time. Let's start with fundraising. What have been some of the challenges that you've seen as like patterns that keep coming up for founders, but especially for women founders?
Yeah, I mean, founders are, the only difference between raising money as a woman and a man is sexism, right? The only difference between raising money as a white person and a person of color is racism. And so like, those are the things. And I won't bore you with the details because you 2 live in this planet and know exactly how messed up it is, right? So those are the differentiators. In terms of fundraising challenges in general, most businesses are not venture backable, which means that most businesses, if you give them money, do not scale a lot faster, right? And so therefore,
most businesses don't need venture capital funding. And so one of the hardest things that conversations to have with founders or to have with yourself is to say, is this a venture backable business? And if it is, great. If it's not, that's fine, but you're probably not going to raise venture capital. And so instead, you need to think about, how do I make this business work without outside capital? If it is a venture backable business, it's something that really can scale to, billions of dollars in revenue, hundreds of millions and billions of users, great. Then how do you get there? And generally speaking, it means, you need to be in a market that's big enough to support multiple billion-dollar companies. If you're in a market that's $1 billion total market size, right? And then you're like, kind of mess up here, kind of mess up there, like getting even 10% market share is super hard. So all this sudden, getting 10%, 100 million in revenue would be hard. And then there's things that go wrong or things that you're messing up. And now all of a sudden you're at 20 million in revenue, and that's not a lot of money, right? So if you start with a market that's a $100 billion market, right, then 1% is a billion, and 10% is 10 billion. And all of a sudden these numbers are much bigger. And so you can mess up a lot more and still end up in an interesting place. So I always encourage founders to go after huge markets. And then the other thing I always encourage founders to go after is something that they have a lot of personal fit for, something that they are deeply passionate about. I have known the Ladies Get Paid women for years and years now, and, they're so passionate about this topic. And well before, there were book deals and like all of the glamour, they just were passionate about this thing, and they were doing it as a part-time thing because they were so passionate. And anybody can look at the pay gap in America and the world. Anybody can look at, the lack of capital that women have to invest as professional investors, all of that, and say, well, obviously there's a problem. But if you don't really care, you're probably not running a business unpaid as a second job for years to try to make it happen. Right. And so it's one of those things where having founder market fit, being a topic that you're personally knowledgeable about, personally passionate about, and that you would kind of be working on even without the job, I think is a great indication that when things get tough, and things always get tough, you will be in a good position to persevere. And I also think smart investors see that, right? And smart investors are very leery of investing in founders who just kind of are like, oh, I realize, I call it an MBA in search of a problem, right? Somebody who's doing their MBA, class, their second year, and they do an entrepreneurship class, and they're like, oh, I did some research on this market. It's a big market. I should start a company.
Right. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I want to remind people really quickly, I see some great comments in the chat, remind people to use the Q&A function. We'll get to some Q's and A's at the end of this. Now, Sarah, you make an interesting point that I haven't heard a ton. This idea of businesses that are not venture backable, right? That's always been something that we have acknowledged. Hopefully, if you're starting a business, you acknowledge that you're either going to need venture money or you're not, or not immediately. But I want to kind of press a little harder on this idea of the trajectory of a company, of a startup, from side project to full-time project, to full-time occupation, right? This is my life, and I'm going to do it as a 9 to 5, and also however many other hours it takes. As an investor, do you see those businesses that started out as passion projects as more compelling in terms of an investment than the people who just, quit their job at a media startup and decided to go full-time without doing a side project first?
No, I think it just depends on the person, right? So some people are maybe, able to line up investment before they leave their job. That's great. That's fine. Other people can just afford to fund themselves, right? And so they can take 6 months off, a year off, 2 years off. With COVID, there are a lot of people who don't have jobs right now, and in a 9 to 5 sense, for reasons outside of their control. And so maybe they had more time. And if you have, it could be anything from your immigration status to health insurance needs. There are tons of people who genuinely cannot quit a job until they have the ability to get a new job. And so I don't care about that. But my flip side would be when I meet somebody, I'll talk to founders and they'll say, oh, I really want to start I'll make something up. I really want to start a, direct to consumer, whatever, cannabis business. Okay, cool. And I'm in a state where it's legal and I want to do it. Great. And then I'm like, well, what do you have to show so far? And they're like, well, I don't have anything. I'm like, why? And they're like, well, I need to raise money. I need to raise money first. I'm like, that's so weird. Like, when did Instagram start charging? When did it become expensive to just make an Instagram account and start posting content and getting followers and building a voice and following, relevant accounts? And when did it become expensive to make a Google form that, you put on like a $10 landing page, right, on Squarespace that says, hey, sign up coming soon, and then drive people towards it, right? When did it become expensive to tweet about the topics you're going to build? And if you're not willing to do something if you're not willing to get started until someone hands you a check, that's not bad, but I would argue that means stay away from startups, because no matter how much you get paid as a founder for years and years and years, at least 5 years, it's going to pale in comparison to the amount of work you do, probably until you have an exit, right? So, oh my God, you're making, maybe $300,000 a year, you're working 20-hour days. You haven't been to a friend's wedding or baby shower or birthday in years, right? And it's not always like that, but often if your company is successful, it is. So, and that's a good problem to have, but that ROI is still not going to be there. So, if you don't love it enough to get started now, I would not for my sake, but for your sake, I would say maybe this isn't the right thing.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. And I get a lot of recent college grads asking for advice about careers because I worked for a company that people wanted to work for. And my first piece of advice is always, an internship is great, but an internship is not necessarily the end all be all. We are armed with so many tools today, whether it's TikTok or YouTube or like WordPress or Substack. Just get out and start creating, start building a portfolio of whatever it is you want to do. And I'm speaking a little more specifically to journalism grads, but it's easy today, right? Or it should be easy. We are armed with so many tools for communication and for listening and sharing. So let's use them is, I think, what we're getting at. So when we think about growing businesses as a founder, what are some of the challenges that you didn't see coming, right? Like there are certain challenges we can identify. We know there are going to be long days. There are going to be difficult pitch conversations, et cetera. But what were some surprises that you perhaps did not see coming when you were first starting out in your career, both as a founder and as an investor?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is learn on somebody else's dime. The cheapest thing, the best thing you can do for yourself is learn on somebody else's dime. Mm-hmm. These jobs are really hard, and they're hard in weird ways. They're hard when things are good. They're hard when things are bad. They're hard. They're just hard. And it's sort of, you're pretty isolated. Even if you have a co-founder, you're dealing with different parts of the business. So you might be, on the engineering side and killing it, and then your business co-founder is not doing super well. And then all of a sudden, even though you're technically kind of equals, there's tension there, right? And so they're not even tension, but there's just a difference. So it's different than working at a bigger company where you have 5 coworkers who have the same title you do, and you get together at lunch and you complain about your boss. You are literally your boss. You are the only person you can complain about. If you don't like your investors, then you should complain to yourself about picking those investors or not being able to find other options, right? So the sheer sort of weight of responsibility coupled with all of the other problems that are just inherent to starting something, right? What if nobody likes it? What if too many people like it and a huge tech company copies it? What if, Instagram changes their algorithm? What if a deal falls through? What if there's a global pandemic, right? So there's all these things. And it's one of those things where you're so much better prepared. I've never gone into a role completely cold, meaning before I was a founder, I worked at a lot of startups. Before I was a VC, or before I started a fund, I worked for other VC funds. So, and that is not something that I did because I was like refusing to go into something cold. It was something that I did because I needed money. So I had to have a job to get money. And then I liked what I did at those jobs, and then eventually decided to go start my own version of those jobs, right? To be very clear, but I will say that I often see founders who have the ability financially to just go jump into something. And I would argue that almost every single one of them would have been better off spending 6 months or 12 months, even 3 months at a really early stage startup, just working around the clock to understand all of the different things, because it's so much easier and faster to build a company when you know the kind of basic block and tackle to look out for. And you kind of know, it's the commercial for diapers, right? Live, learn, and get loves. By the time you're on your third kid, presumably, it's still crazy, but it's a lot less scary than your first kid. So, go be a nanny, to really torture the metaphor, before having twins.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Get that experience in however you can. Now, a lot of what you've brought up tonight in this conversation so far centers around this idea of working really, really hard, kind of being synonymous with being a founder and working at startups, which 10 out of 10 can agree, like that is exactly what it has been like in my experience. But it does bring up this idea of accountability and responsibility being super important, but also it's really hard to work 20-hour days. To your point earlier, it's really hard to miss your friends' weddings and baby showers and, to miss these big life events because you're busy building something. No matter how fulfilling that is, it still can be really tough. So I want to talk now a little bit about growing the kind of mental strength and mental toughness to ensure that you can be a good founder and you can be a good leader for the business that you're building. What would you say have been some of the biggest lessons, whether it's a class, a book, a mentor, what have you, that prepared you to go into the business world as a founder and now an investor, ready to kind of approach it from a healthy place where you feel like you're getting the fulfillment that you need, both personally and professionally? And do you think that's possible to strike that happy medium?
I think that at some point you get to a point where you need both. I also think, especially for younger people, I was speaking at a college campus, or like virtually, a few weeks ago, and they're like, what do you think about work-life balance? I was like, I think you're 19 and you're definitely not going to marry whatever idiot you're dating. Like, why are you worried about having a life?
Yeah.
Right. Like what kind of life do you need? Like, how fun is hanging out in your dorm room? Right. And I loved college. So that's not a knock on that. It's just the reality is that, yes, if you are like a 40-year-old mom of two, don't ask me about work-life balance. My mother is still very upset that I'm single. But like, the reality is that like, don't worry about work-life balance until you need it. And the reality is, Serena Williams is a great example, right? One of the best tennis players in the world ever, the best tennis player in the world ever, probably the best athlete in the world ever. I don't think that she spends a lot of time thinking, how do I get more balance, particularly pre-having kids, right? How do I get more balance out of my job? How do I make sure that I leave the courts at a reasonable hour, right? Because you're doing something you love and you're passionate about it. And that's what being a founder is, right? And there are tons of great work-life balance jobs, like move to Washington, D.C., get a job in federal government. Like, you can literally go online, see the pay schedules, as long as you don't get fired, which is relatively hard, you know exactly what your, what your uptick in pay will be every year. And then you can retire after 40 years with a gold watch, right? So, and you truly do not work weekends. You do not work overtime for the most part. So there are jobs that let you do that. Now, are most people deeply passionate about being like the assistant to the assistant comptroller of the federal whatever? Maybe not, but like, you're picking something different. And so, I think a lot of it is just choose your choice. And if you want to be a founder, and then you come to me and your first question is, how do I make sure I have work-life balance? I'm like, go work in literally anything else, and it is what I get balance from is that I love what I do. And I love my job. And that doesn't mean I work 24 hours a day, but it just means that I love my job. And so when I'm there for the 12th or 16th hour doing something, sometimes I'm not thinking, how do I get more work-life balance? I'm thinking, I'm doing this presumably for a reason. I'm doing it because it needs to be done. And there's a whole other conversation around checking in with yourself to say, am I a control freak? And am I not giving away any responsibility that other people could have? And am I micromanaging people? But if those are your problems, like, one, you should solve them, but those are a different set of problems. If you're doing the work because you truly have to do it, there's no one else to do it for whatever reason, or there's just not much work, so even everybody else around the table is working as much as you, just own it, right? If you've ever ran a marathon or a half marathon, or in my case, like run a mile, you do the same thing. You're not sitting there saying, oh, this is so fun. Oh my God, I love this, right? If running a marathon is easy for you, you probably run an ultra marathon, then you run an Ironman, right? And that's fine. But when you're doing it, it's not about like, oh my God, this feels so good. Like, running an ultra marathon, I do not care who you are, does not feel as good as like, laying out in the sun on a Sunday afternoon for a half hour.
Right.
But you're choosing, right, to totally go JFK on you. You go to the moon, not because it's easy, but because it's hard. And so, your work-life balance should be finding fulfillment in what you're doing, not in, oh my God, I need to go to happy hour 4 days a week.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. Also that it evolves throughout your life, right? You have different needs. It's not like this is a static decision that you're making at age 22, what your work-life balance is going to be for the rest of your career. This is something that can change from job to job, from season to season, et cetera. I do think though, and I made a note of this when I was preparing, that I have asked this question to a lot of women as a woman myself. What is it like to create work-life balance for you? And I get frustrated at myself for wanting to ask that question to women, maybe more than I do for men, because it's less of a concern for a lot of men, because there are different pressures on men, right? Or smaller pressures in some capacities. So for the women specifically in the crowd, do you have any advice about that? Is it a different question for women than it is for men, achieving that work-life balance and maintaining the kind of like mental capacity to have a life outside of what you're doing?
So one thing I really hate is the idea that like women are mothers, right? Like it's like squares and quadrilaterals, right? If you have a kid and you identify as a woman, then theoretically, sure, you're a mother. Most women don't have kids at home that they have to take care of at any given point in time, right? And when you look at work-life balance, that's broadly what we're talking about, right? If you don't have time to work because your live-in boyfriend is like so messy that you have to do 5 hours of chores a night, dump him. Like,
get a new boyfriend.
Or just dump him. Yes, like don't do that, right? And the other thing is, there's really interesting research, and I don't at all remember, I think it was like in Atlantic or New York Times, but there's really interesting research that they reported out that basically shows that if you, as an ambitious woman, who wants to marry a man, cannot find a partner who will support your ambition and your career, you will be happier not getting married. And as somebody in my 30s who has a lot of friends in their 40s and 50s, I can tell you that you see this play out, because all of a sudden you have a 12-year-old kid or a 15-year-old kid and a spouse who isn't really leaning in. And it's like, you signed up for this. Like, you knew who he was, like, very early on. People don't really, change that much. Right. And so everything that, literally do yourself do the pettiest, most quantitative thing you can today. And like, go into your phone drafts and like write a time-stamped entry of like every friend in a relationship or marriage where you're like, in 5 years, I know they're going to be miserable because X. And then set an alarm for 5 years, and you're probably across the board right? When I was in high school, I had a friend who was dating a guy, and I was just like, you should break up with him. I don't like him. It's just not right. For like 15, everybody was like, Sarah, you're so unsupportive. They're divorced. He was terrible. Yeah. And it's not like I was right. It's just that like, I wasn't reading tea leaves. It was just pretty obvious. Right. And so I think when we talk about work-life balance for women, like I can't help it if you have bad taste in partners, and if you choose your choice again, and you want to be with somebody who doesn't pick up the dishes, who doesn't, pay for the cleaning lady, who doesn't, pitch in, choose that choice and own it and say, I know that I am having children with somebody, or I want to be in a relationship with somebody who is never going to pull their fair share of the weight. And I know that I'm going to have to pull more of it. And I'm perfectly fine with that.
Yeah.
And then just be fine with it. There's tons of families where people are fine with it, right? The problem is that you get into something like, if I bite into a banana and I'm like, why isn't this an apple? I'm so angry. Sarah, that's a banana. That's a banana. Like, you can not eat a banana. You can go try to find an apple, or you can enjoy the banana. But like, I can't help you with the cognitive dissonance of you being angry that what you know is a banana is an apple. Like, I can't help you with that. And I think that, there's tons more nuance around the work-life balance discussion, but it's generally aimed at women who have kids and not men who have kids, because we as a society have created a world where that is true. And then we as women choose partners who perpetuate that dynamic. And then you want like me, a like single person who doesn't know you at all, to come on a talk in 5 minutes and fix it for you. I can't help you. I can point you to some good divorce lawyers, but that's complicated too. I can't fix it for you.
Yeah, I love the realistic approach. And I see somebody put in the chat, Tamina, there's more to women's lives than relationships with men. absolutely 1,000,000% completely agree with what you're saying. The reason that I wanted to ask a question like this of you, Sarah, is just because this is the reality of being a woman who is also a founder and being a founder who is also a woman. You're going to be faced with questions like this. And that's the perhaps called unfortunate. That is the unfortunate reality. So that's why we have to talk.
There is a guy in the chat who's trying to yell at me because I'm giving relationship advice. It's okay, sir. You don't have to stay here.
Like Claire said at the beginning, none of this is advice, right? It's all just our perspectives. But
exactly.
I mean, it's also an important perspective. So with that, let's transition just a little bit here. We are talking some about community. Reminder, again, if you have any questions, we'll get to some Q&A in just a few minutes here. I want to talk about applying these lessons that you've learned throughout an incredible career so far, how you apply those lessons to help other women get into positions of power, to become decision makers, to become founders. What role should women who have already achieved success or who have met goals that they've set for themselves play in ensuring that women can achieve those in the future, right? How can we enforce this idea of community and helping each other, and that a rising tide really does lift all ships? How have you experienced that in your career?
Yeah, I think that there's a great Toni Morrison quote, right? That's like, your real job, once you go and get great jobs or whatever, I think it was a graduation speech, is to free others, right? To work to free others if you are free. And I think that that's always true. And so, if you feel like you are doing a great job at life, and because, you are outwardly successful, but you are not doing anything to help other people. And that doesn't mean, it should, like philanthropic stuff, it doesn't have to be philanthropic, right? But like, if you're not, explicitly helping other people so that they don't face the same barriers you faced, whatever those barriers are, then I would argue that you're not really successful. You just have a bunch of money in the bank, and that's fine. And some people choose willingly to just have a bunch of money in the bank, but like, why, and the other thing is, like, it's so, like, I have this thing where I don't lie, and I'm a really direct person, but it's actually something different than that. Lying is just like such like small dick energy. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but like, it is. And the reason it is because, like, why would I lie? Why do I have to lie? If I have to lie, it's because I'm afraid of something. I'm afraid of your response. I don't feel like I have the power in the dynamic to be direct and honest. So, like, it's kind of the same. Helping people is something that you should be able to do easily, right? And if you can't easily help somebody, you can't easily say, if I reach out to you and I said, Kinsey, you worked at Morning Brew. I would love to be, introduced to somebody there, right? For a very specific, good reason. I send you a very cogent email. It's not just like a dumb request. If you can't make that introduction to your former team, that's on you, not on me, right? And it doesn't mean that you're required to, right? If I'm rude or you're overwhelmed, it's always fine to say no. But the people who don't feel like I used to sort of have this dynamic with people sometimes where I'd be like, why isn't this person willing to help me? And it would be like a really basic, easy request. And then what I'd eventually realize is like, oh, they can't help themselves, right? They don't have the agency. They might actually have it, but they don't feel like they have the agency. They don't feel like they have the power. They don't feel like they can help themselves. And candidly, you do see that a lot sometimes in women in the workplace. And candidly, I feel like I see it a lot sometimes in white women where it's like, well, I'm here, but I don't know how secure my seat is. Like, go find out, right? And I'm not saying do that again if you're like, I'm one paycheck away from whatever. This is like, I see your Birkin, right? I see your vacation home. I see, broadly your bank account. You have the agency to go help other people. Right. You're just choosing to play small. And so for me, I've been helped by so many other people. No one in the world is self-made, right? And that's not like a Kylie Jenner shout out. Like, literally no one in the world is self-made. Every human in the world was literally created by two other people, right? No one's self-made. And that's fine and great. And so, there's so many people who've been helpful along the way in that. But it also never occurred to me that like it was an option or okay, or it would be acceptable to not give back. And that doesn't mean that every single person who, ever DMs me or requests me on LinkedIn or cold emails me gets my time, because nobody has time for that. But it does mean that if I'm not doing anything to help other people, if anybody's not, then my question is like, what are you even doing here?
Yeah.
what's the point?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that I just want to highlight the idea that, especially for white women in the business world, we are in a position of privilege, relative privilege, and it is so important to use that to help other people who for so long have been barred from helping themselves. So use the position that you have to go out and help other people, because when we do, good things happen. Like Sally says, like, nothing bad happens when women have more money. Nothing bad happens when women help other women, and no one is self-made. So from the venture perspective, with that side of your career, obviously it's not entirely just handing money out to people. You have a little bit of skin in the game. How do you identify founders who have really high potential, and the people who you do want to help, the people who you do want to scale and grow and invest in? What are some of the biggest green flags for you?
Yeah. So, some of them are things I already mentioned, right? So I love when people are building a company in a huge, huge, huge market. I love when people have great founder product fit, right? So they are the right person, obviously, to build, not just in that space, but they're the right person to build with like the business model that they're building, right? They have some unique insight. They've been passionate about it, whatever it is. And so, those are two really big things. And then the more kind of intangibles, and then obviously I have sectors I like to invest in, all of that. But the more kind of intangibles are things like integrity. And the reason for that is there's so many opportunities to sell your soul, and most of them are relatively low ROI, right? And if you find like a way to get $1 billion for your soul, I am not here to judge. It maybe isn't what I would do, but like, whatever, do you? The reality is, most of the time when you sell your soul, you sell it for not very much money. And so if you're willing to like do sort of small things that lack integrity, that's going to eventually turn into big things. It just is, because humans love progressive overload. We love more, right? And so integrity is really important to me. Being coachable is really important. You never know everything you need to know when it comes to a startup, not because you're not the literal smartest person in the world. You could be, I don't know, but because when you're building a company, you're creating something new. You can't know everything about something that doesn't exist yet. That would be impossible, right? And so if you don't know everything, right, even if you are 100% perfect on everything you know, the fact that when you start a company, you by definition do not know everything means you're going to have to figure some things out. And how do you figure things out? You can go do it yourself, right? But it takes a lot longer to figure things out yourself than to be able to ask somebody. Think about when you're lost, right? If you are lost and you're like, I know that I'm within a mile of where I'm supposed to be. Think about how long it takes if you're on like a city block grid thing, right? So you're in New York and like, that the place you're supposed to go is on 7th Ave, somewhere between, whatever, like 10th and 30th. Going up and down every single block because you just cannot figure out the address is going to take you a lot longer than asking somebody. And if you are not coachable, then you're probably not asking somebody. And startups' biggest enemy is time. And so if you can't ask somebody, it's not like really that I care about as much about like, are you humble? Are you this? Are you that? Those things are good life qualities, and it'll probably make me like working with you more, but it's actually a matter of survival, right? If your oxygen mask is like running out of oxygen and you're under the ocean and you won't ask for directions to get to the surface, what happens when the oxygen runs out? You will literally die.
Yeah.
Dying is just to be clear, in venture, dying is bad. Getting rich is generally good, right? It is really hard to get rich when you're dead. You can technically probably keep the money after you're dead, but like very few people are actually making money after they're dead as a human, right? Your estate can, but you won't be there to enjoy it. And personally, I really like enjoying money. So like you have to stay alive. And the way you stay alive is by being coachable, by asking for advice. And so many people think they have to know all the answers. They have to do it all. Like anybody who's like pointing out, hey, this isn't great, is like, being mean to them or whatever. I am being mean to you if I let you keep doing the wrong thing. Right? I am being helpful to you and your friend and your investor, or just like not somebody being mean to you if I say, hey, you're trying that key in that lock. That's the wrong key. You might want to go, use the other key.
Yeah.
If you're mad at me for that, then like, good luck being locked out.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great point. I think that like apathy is really the worst that you can offer somebody. And I reserve apathy for the people who you like really, really despise. Like if you cared, you would have something to say, good or bad. And taking feedback, regardless of whether or not you want to become a founder or not, you want to put founder on your LinkedIn or your resume. Taking feedback and internalizing it and understanding what matters and what doesn't and how you can apply it to your life is always going to be an invaluable skill. Like period. That's the end of the story. So Sarah, we have some great Q&A here for these last couple of minutes of our conversation. How do you feel, this is from Megan, how do you feel about accelerators and incubators? Totally necessary, or it can be done with a little or a lot of an extra grit? So incubators or accelerators, thoughts, feelings?
I think if you need money, then like I like to say, if the terms are green and the money's like, if the terms are clean and the money's green, take it, right? So if you need money, go to apply to a bunch of accelerators. It's one of the most sort of egalitarian ways to raise money, because you by definition don't really need introductions, right? Like Y Combinator, it's nice if you have like a reference, but it's by no means even the majority of who they take. And so if you need money, go get money. If you don't need the money, then like, why are you bothering to worry about raising money? It's like if you tell me like, which restaurant should I go to for dinner? I just had dinner. And I'm like, well, like, why are you wasting your time and my time with that question? So if you need money and you don't have money, then you should go apply to a bunch of accelerators and incubators. And the ones you get into, you should decide if you want to do it based on whether or not the money terms make sense for you. And is this, if you're asking me specifically, if Megan got into Y Combinator and Techstars and she wants to know which one is better to go to, that's a very different question. And it just depends a lot on your business and, a whole bunch of other things. But in general, like you're asking me, is money good? Is money necessary? Like, I don't know, look at your bank account. Is money necessary? If it is, then like go start raising money, including from accelerators and incubators.
Yeah. I think that's a perfect follow-up for the next question I want to ask. This is from an anonymous question asker. Do you have a clear stance for when you think a founder is ready to start raising their first pre-seed round? And I guess kind of the follow-up is does it depend on what exactly you're building?
Yeah, I think it depends on what you're building. And I also think it depends on where the market is. And it all depends, right? And broadly, is the business venture backable? Do you have, so if you're thinking about raising money, you should say, one, what am I building, right? And what traction do I have, or what headway have I made? And it doesn't have to be, it like for you, right? You don't have to go and like spend years building a new media company in order to go, say, hey, maybe I want to take investors, because you can point to the work you've already done. But if you hadn't done that work in the past, then you'd have to go do something, right? Mm-hmm. And so what do you have some proof point that says I'm a person who can do the thing I'm said I'm going to do? And then the question is, is this business venture backable? And it doesn't have to be venture, but is there somebody who wants to give my business money, right? Restaurants raise money all the time, and they're not generally venture backable. They raise from a different kind of investor. That's great, whatever, we love it. And then you need to go like make a list and say, the first thing you do is make a list of every rich person you know, right? And everyone's like, I don't know that many rich people, blah, blah, blah. Like, no, I guarantee that you know somebody who's rich, right? And most likely. And whether that's like, at summer camp, like your best friend's like uncle, you remember like he had that like big, horse farm, or like your boss, then went to like some big tech company and made a bunch of money, whatever it is, like everybody has somebody who's like 1 or 2 or 3 degrees of connection away who's rich. And you start making those lists. And then you also start making lists of funds like mine that let anybody pitch them, and accelerators and incubators and all the things. And you make that list and you say, who on this list gives money to companies like mine, right? I was talking about this earlier. Almost no venture capital fund invests in cannabis because it's illegal at a federal level, and we are, federally regulated industry, right? And so a couple do, but for the most part, they don't. So if you're starting a cannabis company, don't put my name on your list because I'm a VC fund. I can't give you money, right? You need to go find other people, and maybe you find them, maybe you don't. But you sort of go through that all those practical steps, and then then you say, do I feel like this is a good time to quit my job and go start raising? And if you haven't done, I get these emails all the time from like, kind of like, well, everybody's a loose tie friend right now, it's COVID, but like people I haven't talked to in a while, and they'll be like, Sarah, I want to pick your brain. I quit my job and I'm going to start a company. And like, what do you think I should do? And I'm like, go back in time, don't quit your job, start your company, and like, get all of these things going and then quit. Right. And if you can afford to quit now, then like, why are you listening to me? Go enjoy your rich life. Most of us can't. So the reality is you need to be really, really thoughtful about that. Even just from the most practical purpose of, you can't get unemployment if you quit your job, Right. So if you are not sure you want to quit yet, then don't quit, because then if it doesn't work, you are screwed. And it is bad for women to be screwed unless it's consensual. So what we want is for women to get paid. right? And so like just be really, really, really thoughtful about that stuff, and get into a good place. And there's great resources about, there's tons of podcasts, and like How I Built This is a great one. There's podcasts like 20-Minute VC that talk about what VCs think about. There's so many great, Y Combinator has a ton of essays, Backstage Capital has a ton of great resources. Ladies Get Paid has an amazing Slack group. Yes, I did shout them out because I love them. And there's just so many places to go. So go learn. Learning is free. The internet is free. Well, not actually free, but I know you can all afford it, because otherwise I don't know how you're listening to me unless you're like hiding under my dining room table, which is creepy. Please leave, right? So like you are listening to me on the internet. You have Google. You can do this research and you can get to the point where it's not easier to raise money, but you're so much better prepared. Again, it's like a marathon, right? It's a lot easier to run a marathon if you have trained to run a marathon.
Yeah, perfect. Mic drop. So kind of along that same vein, here's another question about kind of the early days, advice/lessons about finding a founding team. So I would assume in our timeline here of foundership, this is after building something in your spare time, after quitting your job, now you're ready to give it a real go. How do you find the people you want to build it with in the early days?
Yeah. I think that a lot of that is starting to be really intentional about that early, and thinking about that. One of my least favorite founder dynamics is what I call 1 + 1 = 1, right? Which is like, oh my God, we've been best friends forever. We, went to the same summer camp, then we went to the same college, and then we worked at the same job. What I'm hearing, right, is I don't need both of you, because literally you both have the same experiences, right? You had the same majors, the same job, the same everything. What am I getting here, right? Like you're not really able to do different things, right? And so divide and conquer is incredibly important. If you're playing sports and you only have defense or you only have offense, you're relatively screwed, right? And so it's really important to think about that holistically and not just default to, the concept of homophily, right? Of like, I want somebody who's almost exactly like me, so that I don't have to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And that's what you don't want. You want somebody who's different enough from you that you are challenged, that you can feel uncomfortable sometimes. And that's where you grow. And then, you have to become a salesperson, because a huge part of running a company is selling your vision to investors, to employees, to everybody. And often it starts with a co-founder. You have to sell your vision and say, here's why we should do it. Or maybe they love the idea, but they're afraid to quit their job, or they're afraid to fundraise, or they're afraid to whatever. Everybody's afraid. We're all humans. So you're going to have to do some of that selling, so that earlier you start to learn, think about that, generally the better.
Okay. So last couple questions here, hopefully maybe some like rapid-ish fire. This one is from Anonymous. Who are the women founders you admire?
I admire founders who are like working really hard to build something interesting in the world. And you name a fancy female founder, and she's probably a friend of mine, and I'm sure I love her dearly. But the reality is, fixating on, if only I could get 20 minutes with whoever, right? Whitney from Bumble, Kat from Stitch Fix. That doesn't change your life. What changes your life is spending time understanding what you like about them, and often it's their authenticity, right? Whitney's one of the most amazing marketers of all time, and she can be an amazing marketer because she's not trying to be an engineer when she's a marketer, right? And so it's thinking through sort of, what are the qualities that I like in this person, and do I have those qualities, I want to upskill them, or do I not have those qualities and I want to lean into where my talents are, but I also want to, bring in people around the table who do have some of those qualities.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you have any book recommendations? This is from Diana. Any book recommendations or groups to join to get mentorship in entrepreneurship?
I hate the idea of one-on-one mentoring. And the reason I hate it is not because I think it's bad. I think it's great. But I think it is so, like, in tech, we'd call it like rate limiting, which is like you can't move that fast. Because if you're like, I'm listening to Sarah talk, this is really inspiring. Maybe I want to go be an investor. I need to get time with Sarah. You can't get time with me. Not like you can't, but like I'm really busy. It's a pandemic. Like I have to stare at screens 12 hours a day until my eyes bleed. And like I have a line around the corner of people who would love to get time with me. And so does everybody else. So like the idea that you are rate limited in becoming a VC until you get time with me is so dumb, because there are hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of content of me giving my advice. And you know, the stuff that I write on Instagram, on Twitter, on Medium, on, you know, everywhere, the like articles that I've been, you know, profiled for, videos of talks, of panels and podcasts. Like if you want to come to me and be like, Sarah, I want 20 minutes of your time, I'm going to tell you to go spend 20 hours of your time, right? Like consuming content. And I almost guarantee that you're not going to come and need to ask me that question, because I've already answered it a bajillion times.
Yeah.
And so I mentorship is not bad. If you have a mentor organically, great, wonderful, whatever. But there's like this search that started, I think, like kind of maybe 10 years ago of like, you have to have a mentor. You don't have to have a mentor. There is Google. Everybody can be mentored, right? And I used this analogy the other day, like Martin Luther King, none of us here met him, right? Martin Luther King Jr., but we've all hopefully been influenced to like live better lives and be like better humans to make the world a better place. And none of us, unfortunately, ever got the chance to meet him, right? So the idea that like, oh, I can't, you know, protest things, I can't fight to end injustice because until I'm in a room with Martin Luther King Jr. and he can give me advice, like, sweetie, we don't have time for that.
Yeah.
Like, we'll read a speech and like keep it moving, internalize the lessons and keep it moving, right? So with that, you know, some of the podcasts and things I mentioned before are great places to sort of do that ambiently. And then, you know, I think the other piece is like understanding that a lot of the most valuable learnings are not, you know, you guys listening to somebody like me, it's you guys talking to each other and sharing your own experiences. You know, I've never started a company in 2021 coming out of a pandemic, you know, as a first-time founder, and I never will. And so while I have lots of like useful advice about macro things, day to day, there's probably lots of times where the advice you really need is going to be a peer of yours that you find in like the Ladies Get Paid Slack channel or wherever it is, right? So go build your own communities. And you know, when I would give talks in person, there'd always be a line after to ask me questions. And I was always like, talk to each other in those lines. Like literally, I would be like, I love a dramatic flair. So like, I am not taking any more questions until you're all talking to each other in the line. Why? Because your relationships with each other are so much more important than the 30 seconds that you get to like stumble out a question and mess it up. And I give you like a weird answer and then like you forget it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's all scalable, right? The limits of the internet are pretty relatively unknown right now. So use it to your best ability. Talk to people, talk to strangers. We can talk to any strangers today. We don't have to run into them at a corporate event, right? Just get on twitter.com. So with that, Sarah, thank you so much for this incredible insight, for all of these wonderful answers. I have enjoyed soaking up as much knowledge as possible from you today. And I know that it is a rare treat to get this time with you. So I hope everybody out there will understand just how valuable it is and these lessons are. And if you have any questions, Sarah, do you want to tell people where they can find more of your work to soak up all that knowledge?
It's a new site. You probably haven't heard of it, google.com. If you put my name in advice. And then I think Ashley just dropped in the chat a fun session I did with them last year. And then, yeah, I mean, anybody you admire, Google them and you know, follow them on social media, like soak up their stuff ambiently. And so many, you know, of these questions that you have, there's nothing new under the sun. And so whatever the question you have, someone else has had it and somebody's answered it 10 times in a deeply eloquent, thoughtful, well-researched way. So go find it. And you know, the goal should be when you have a question, like go find a reasonable answer as quickly as possible so that then you're no longer wandering around with the question, you have the answer and you can act. And the reason I say that is not general life advice. It's because as founders, time is your scarcest commodity. Get good at finding answers really quickly.
There we go. All right. Well, thank you so much, Sarah. For everybody out there watching, make sure that you check out tomorrow's Fireside. Not Fireside. This was the Fireside. Tomorrow's closing keynote tomorrow evening. And thank you again to everybody at Ladies Get Paid and Public and Lolli for having us. It was a great time, and I hope to see all of you soon. Thank you.